Play It Forward Tips and Tricks with Rachel Fleischer, filmmaker, writer, director, producer. Rachel, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. That's awesome that you're happy to be here. You don't have to be. It's cool.
Well, I am.
Thank you. It makes a difference. So, best practices. Let's talk.
Sure.
Pre-production. Arguably the most important stage. They're all important. Tell me.
It is. Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, it sets the tone. Just generally speaking, my best practices.
Yeah. Like what, okay. Younger filmmakers, older, yourself, when you go into the next production, what is it that you've kind of like ingrained in your head? This is what I need to do. This works. This doesn't work.
Yeah. I think the most important thing is just really knowing the script, whether it's a script that you wrote or a script that someone else wrote. For me, I'm mostly used to directing things that I've written. And in some ways that makes it easier, but in some ways it makes you take things for granted that you think because they've come out of your mind. But in some ways, I think it makes you need to even look at the text harder, and with more of a discerning eye. I really like to. I studied with a wonderful teacher named Judith Weston, and she talks a lot about mysterious lines that don't always make sense to you, or they could have multiple meanings. So I like to really dig into those. And because I'm also an actor, I think it gives me a nice advantage to really imagining what it would be like to say the lines. But I think the best thing I can do as a director in pre-production is ask a lot of questions of myself, of the script, of other actors, of department heads, and also really open up a dialogue about asking questions of that people should feel comfortable asking questions of me and of other people on the team. I think that's probably the most important thing when you're diving into a story, when you're diving into other characters. I think the best thing you can do is realize that you have to learn a lot about them. And so just kind of starting from that place of being open to not knowing everything and just question after question after question. And then you start to sort of come up with your own answers. So that's kind of my favorite thing to do and the first thing I like to do. But I think that I like, whether I'm directing or writing or producing or acting, I like to be really, really prepared so that I can forget everything on the day, whether I'm acting or directing, and just be present with the material, be present with the moment, be present with the crew, the other actors. But you can't be present if you're worried that you don't know the material. So I like to over prepare. Again, no matter whether I'm directing or writing or acting. So that's kind of like text and the script. I like to do a lot of rehearsals with actors. But again, that's just with the same idea of feeling prepared, making sure that they feel prepared. I do think that there are moments when you're working with actors where it's a fine line and everyone's different and it depends on the story, depends on the characters. But, I do think you can over prepare when it comes to acting, and certain scenes may be better just kind of not over prepared, or maybe not preparing much at all. And some scenes require more preparation. So I think as a director, you just have to intuitively know what those moments are. And usually your actors will tell you. I like to let the actors lead the way with almost everything. And funnily enough, like as a mother, I feel my intuition is always to let my kids lead in terms of telling me what they need. And I think actors should have that same privilege because they're the ones telling your story. So having faith and confidence in really building that relationship is vital. And that's why I do think the rehearsal process is so great. But it can look different every day. It can look different on every project. And then personally, I like to have a lot of visuals for myself, but also for department heads about what the look is going to be. And even if it's a a film that doesn't maybe necessarily have a heavy production value or like a strong visual aesthetic. Maybe it's more naturalistic, but I still like to give references for myself or the DP, wardrobe. So yeah, that's kind of generally what I
That's
like to do.
awesome. It's a very thorough outline. And I think, as you're talking, I'm reflecting on my experience doing it and as well. And I think, you build that kind of, let's call it a container of collaboration. And that's
Mm-hmm.
one really great way to do it is to keep engaging others through questions. I mean, that's such a,
Yeah.
that's how we get to know people and how we build dialogue and relationships is through inquiry. So, you start off with that inquiry, and that inquiry is going towards a goal, and that goal is a shared vision, so
Mm-hmm.
we can all buy in and collaborate on the same thing, and we're not all making a different kind of
And a
movie.
shared consciousness,
Yeah,
because when you go into a movie, it is kind of this, whether it's a one
yeah,
day shoot or a 3 month shoot or
yeah,
5 years, whatever, you are kind of collecting. There is a collective consciousness that takes place as in creating a shared vision. So I think
yeah,
that, yeah, I think that
yeah.
that's important.
No, that's I think really important that you kind of, mention it in that light, because consciousness brings up kind of a really a mindful connection, but it even goes beyond. It can kind of translate to a metaphysical. Hey, we're all creating this work of art where we're pulling from the unknown to create something that is in form. So how do we,
Absolutely.
build this unit, this culture, this vision, this thing together. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's cool. And I guess, after inquiry, there is like the repetition, there's that rehearsal, and you want to, be
Mm-hmm.
sensitive about, hey, where or when is done. And that can change with different people and different scenes and different
Mm-hmm.
actions, and you don't want to wear out certain spontaneity and mystery. So, and I think that's great. And a lot of
Absolutely.
people, I think a lot of people is also one of the things that I didn't do. I remember I was like first film I was trying to make, and it, I really storyboarded it heavily. And I think, now maybe I do that, but I think there are a lot of other more visual ways of just like mood boards or creating decks. I talked to another artist recently, and she was saying, well, she's really created essentially a pitch deck, used borrowed from ad agencies, and taken that into
Mm-hmm.
creating film to get that theme, shared visual kind of understanding. So it's great. Anything else before we move on to production, being on set?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, I think just really connecting with everyone you're working with and feeling like everyone's on the same page and feeling comfortable. I think
Yeah,
feeling comfortable, is really important as
yeah,
well.
getting
Um,
that trust. Yeah,
Trust. It's a
yeah,
big thing. Yeah. But
definitely.
yeah, no, that's it.
Cool. Awesome. And so then you are on set, and it's, first day, the second day, the fifth day, the last day, whatever. Um, you're shooting, there are problems,
Mm.
invariably. Things aren't going well. Um, or there's just so much stress put upon you as a director to be mindful of, the overall vision that you're guiding into fruition. What are some of the best practices that you can share to help you maybe avoid that feeling of being overwhelmed or manage it?
Well, I think first thing is we're not curing cancer or saving lives. We're just making movies. So not to take yourself too seriously
Yeah,
is probably, not to diminish the stress that one can feel in
sure,
any professional setting.
sure.
But thankfully
I'm
we are.
guilty
Oh
of
yeah,
that.
we all are, and it
Yeah,
is stressful. But yeah, I think most of that stress is a result of maybe not great communication. So I try, and I mean, I haven't been in that situation too much personally. I've seen it on other sets, but yeah, I think just like pausing for a moment, kind of like diffusing a situation, figuring out what the cause of the stress is, and then just, I think sometimes when you, if you're a director and you're wearing multiple hats, it can feel like a lot. And so I think it's important to surround yourself with team members who can help you balance some of those stressors so that it doesn't feel like it's all on you, especially in independent filmmaking. I think the director is often the writer, the producer. Sometimes they're also the DP, and maybe they're acting and they're doing one of the other departments as well. And that's a lot. So I think having someone you really trust on set, whether it's a producer or just a friend, that can kind of help manage and give you a little perspective, I think is really good. But I think typically if everyone feels like they can trust each other and feels like they can communicate, then most things I think can be resolved with relative amounts of ease and comfort. But, at the end of the day, I mean, it's all part of the process, I guess. Again, to go back to my wonderful teacher, Judith Weston, she always says, bring your day. So, which I don't think is her saying, I think someone else said it, and it's a famous director, and I'm forgetting who it is right now, but, use it. If it's stressful, use it.
I guess that's what, I would follow up by asking, well, what does that mean to bring your day?
Be present with whatever feelings you have. If you woke up and you were in a terrible mood, or you're going through something personally, use the subconsciousness and the subtext of your own personal life and bring it into that character. That, you're not your character, but you kind of are, because you're using everything, the type of acting I like, which is where you use who you are. And that is the foundation and the baseline for what you project, what you deliver. The consciousness of that character's mind doesn't mean that the character is you, but there's something real within you that the character is using. So use it, because that's the most authentic thing anyway. I mean, we're all great at playing ourselves. And if we use that authentic person as sort of a launching point and an access and an entry point to get into a character's consciousness, then it's actually, you're doing yourself an advantage. But you're also doing the story, I think, a service by just being real with it. Doesn't mean if the character is going through something horrible and the person is maybe having the best day of their lives, that is a weird dichotomy and a weird contradiction. And yet at the same time, aren't we all walking contradictions? And to me, that's a great gift to have, to be able to play two things at once that are diametrically opposed in theory, but yet somehow you can kind of, I don't know.
Well, the way I see it is, it's all a circle, right? This is my interpretation. So the way I see it is, if it's a circle, and in the example that you mentioned, it's like, I know when I'm like supercharged and positive, I'm better able to access compassion within me.
Right.
And so if I would have to go to a place of darkness, you can give it that flavor. But I think as a director, when you say bring your day, it's like, I'm like, yeah, because I think, when you shut off that part of yourself that's dealing with whatever it is that you're dealing with your life, but it limits a part of your wholeness as a person to be able to,
that's right,
serve at that moment fully. You're kind of just saying,
I mean, all you can do is be present as a human and as an actor. So if you're presently dealing with something, you can feel grief and speak lines of joy, and that's kind of like, that's a cool thing. You might get the most interesting delivery of a line ever, because it's the opposite of how you'd think it should be delivered, and yet there's all this nuance and depth that like you would have never had if you woke up in a good mood. So you never know.
Agreed. It's all fuel for the fire.
That's right.
Cool. All right. So you got maybe a minute to give us some insight into how do you give adjustments to your actors and maybe to your DP?
Well, let's see. Um, I guess it kind of depends on what the adjustment is, but usually if I'm watching a take, there's sort of an intuitive thing that's like, this feels right or this doesn't feel right. So I think the trick is giving an adjustment that doesn't make an actor feel self-conscious, but makes them feel supported and gives them space to feel like they can experiment. Because the moment an actor gets in their head, it shuts them down. So I like to just, let's try it this way. Or I think asking questions is a great way. Like, I love that. I feel like, in this moment, like, how do you think you'd be feeling if X just happened? And then they kind of respond. And then I ask them another question. And then, sometimes it's just a series of questions. Sometimes it can be a very literal, you know what, let's just do that. But like, let's do it twice as fast and just see what happens. There's a million adjustments. I don't like to give line readings because that's just, I don't think that if I'm going to make an adjustment, I like it to have to do with whatever the person would be. I like it to connect to something emotionally. But hold on, someone's calling me. Oh wait, can I pause this for 1 second? Are you there?
Yep.
Can you hold for 1 sec because my husband is calling me? Thanks. Oh, hold on. Let me call him. Let's see if can you still hear me? Cool. Yeah, I mean, I think, if you've been rehearsing, it's just an extension of conversations you've been having during the rehearsal process. But yeah, I think I'm just always very conscious about not wanting to put someone in their heads.
Yeah.
And I like to, everything I do is kind of led with my heart and led from an emotional place. Not to say that there aren't directions that are just technical. Like, when you do that, can you just walk in, give it an extra beat, But even a technical adjustment, I still like to connect it to something emotional, if it's possible. But sometimes I also think that it depends on the type of actor that you're working with and knowing the actor. Some actors don't need all that stuff. They're just like, just tell me what way you want me to walk in and what I'm feeling, or so I really do think it's such a curated art form. And I think the best directors know that there's no one size fits all approach to an actor, to a scene, to anything. It's like everything is moment to moment, and everything is really knowing how someone's going to operate and being so preemptively sensitive to how they're going to respond and how to get something out of them. But I think it can be great to surprise someone, or have one actor surprise another actor. But again, it's like you just have to be so intuitive about reading in this case, your audience are your actors, like reading them and knowing how they're going to respond. And I think that's another really valuable part of having a rehearsal period, is getting to know your actors, getting to know how you can kind of work with them and how they respond best.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's
Uh-oh,
also the
hold on, I
fun.
lost.
Oh,
Speak now.
I was just saying it's for
So
sure.
weird. Now I can't hear
No,
you.
can't hear me.
Okay, now I can. Go
All
ahead.
right. I was just saying that's, part of the fun of this whole process and role as a director is, having that sensitivity and intuitive um, discernment of, what will help your actor get to what it is you feel the scene is asking.
Yeah.
So it's fun.
And
Um,
making sure
yeah.
that your actor feels comfortable coming to you for help, like sometimes actors feel pride and they don't want to say I need help. Um, but you just want them to feel like they can really trust you.
Well, how do you
Because
do
also
that?
when they feel, pardon?
Oh, go ahead. No, you had a thought.
No, when they feel safe with you, just person to person, forget actor director relationship, just when there's a connection and they trust you, then they trust themselves and then they're willing to be vulnerable. But and in theory, you'd think most actors are able to access that vulnerability all the time, but they're not, especially if they're feeling self-conscious or protective or whatever. They're people like everyone else. So I think your job as a director is to make someone feel comfortable and feel like they can be vulnerable
Well,
from moment to moment.
it's interesting that you bring up the uh word vulnerability, because not less than probably 30 minutes ago I was talking about vulnerability to my wife and
Mm,
what it really means, as a dictionary definition, and then the way people use it. And I think the dictionary, more very kind of strict definition of vulnerability is, feeling threatened by an external force.
mm,
So I think it's interesting the way we've kind of use it in this emotional sense, is that we've got to let down our uh identity or the game we're playing or what we want, how we want to be perceived, and say, okay, well, I'm going to allow myself to be uh authentic, real, and unknown to myself. Like I don't
yeah.
even know what may come of me, and I'm going to allow that judgment, in. And so
Mm-hmm.
now that judgment is okay. I've got to, be vulnerable to feeling judged because I can't control someone else's judgment of me,
Right.
in the way that I usually do on a day-to-day
That's
basis
right.
by saying, "Hi, how you doing? What's going on?" So that is where we can connect. That's the most fertile ground, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, to just piggyback on what you're saying, is that, like, well, and which is a question that I posed, is how do you make people feel safe around you? And saying you're not going to judge them, um, even though you may see some of the games that we all play, in terms
Mm-hmm.
of how we want to come across or be viewed or want to view ourselves, so it's such, when we play in that space together, it's such a there's so much wealth of, enrichment there for everyone, to
Yeah.
have. And I think when we create those characters, that's really what we're doing, is saying, hey,
Mm-hmm.
look at these characters, aren't they just like us? you know
Of course. They
right.
are us.
Yeah. Exactly. Did you have some other thought that you wanted to add to that?
No, you
No.
said everything. Yeah.
Okay. Um, all right, post-production. We're done. We did it. Cool. We've got a ton of footage and we've got to make sense of it all. Are you going through, shot list where you took notes copiously on your takes? Are you reviewing all your footage? How do you go into it?
Let's see. I mean, yeah, I definitely like, well, I like to let an editor have some space and give them time to make a first assembly. I think that's that being said, if I can get my hands on a hard drive and watch all the dailies and make notes about the takes that I like, it's always really nice to kind of just go in with your own preparation. But I think it's really important when you hire an editor that you trust them. And so part of that trust is giving them the space to just put their first pass in. And then, what your notes are, that the takes you like best, but you're just kind of surrendering control, letting an editor give you their first pass. And I think part of that is building a good relationship and trust with an editor. But I think the other thing is you get a gift of things that surprise you that you just would never know. So it does two things. It works on that relationship, but you also see things you would have never chosen because you were so set on another take because you liked the performance better, or the camera work was just better. But then you're like, oh, wow, actually, that was a great moment. So, yeah. And then I like to give notes. I always prefer to sit with an editor as much as possible. It's just so much easier. But sometimes, again, it's like learning. Everyone's different. And if you worked with an editor more than once, you guys start to just develop a rapport. And it's like, no, you don't even have to, they preempt what you want them to do before you can say it. And that's magic when that happens. It doesn't always work that way. I think more often than not, it doesn't. When you're an indie filmmaker, anyway, you don't always have a choice of who you work with. But yeah. And then I think I'm always sort of favoring, like, once the bones of the story are there, then, it's all about sort of weighing out, like, what's the best performance, but this, what's the prettiest shot? And does this shot that you love the greatest emotional moment, is there sound that's an issue? And do we pick one over the other? But yeah, I think, I'm always thinking most about performance and story, and then everything else, all the technical stuff kind of has to take a slight backseat to it unless it's just so distracting. And then, yeah, I just work with the editor until I get what I want and get it to where I want it to be. But I also really like to just say, well, what do you think? Because sometimes I feel very strongly, but then other times I really am not sure. And often when I feel strongly, I'm wrong.
To wrap up, I was just going to ask, what is your favorite thing about post process, and maybe least favorite?
Oh, I love watching it come together. I mean, that's the sort of obvious answer. It's so thrilling to see something become real that was in your head. It's very satisfying. But beyond that, I would just say that, again, like the collaboration with people that you really trust, and just being surprised by things that you thought would work that don't work, and being surprised by things that you never thought would work that work, and learning, because it's like, as much as you want to create something perfect, you're never going to, but just like, okay, next time I'm going to do this instead of that, So yeah, I just love working with people. I love talking to people on set or not on set. So it's all, to me, it's just like a selfish way to just like hang out with people that you think are brilliant and cool. So, yeah.
Why do you think it is so satisfying watching something that you just said, that you had in your head come together?
I think this is going to sound so cliche, but I think that people who are artistically inclined, it's the double-edged sword of being an artist and choosing the artist life. And I think most times when you are a creative person pursuing a path in the arts, it can feel lonely and scary, and you feel like you're a crazy person for pursuing something that has no set path. And I think that's how artists feel most of the time, even really successful ones. Those moments where things come together are gratifying because they're proof that maybe you're not a complete mental patient. Maybe this vision that you have has some purpose and some potential to do something beyond live in your head. So yeah, I don't know.
I don't think that
That's
sounds cliche at all. I mean, when I'm
yeah.
listening to you talk, I'm like, oh man, we have to do another series about the life of an artist and, the trade-off,
Yeah.
you know.
Yes, I have had an idea for many, many years. I used to have a blog on the Huffington Post when like there were bloggers on the Huffington Post. I did a whole series on homelessness because I made a feature documentary on homelessness, and they gave me a blog, and every week I would do a different post about different story. And I thought it would be such a cool series. And I'm sure there's, with TikTok and everything, I'm sure there's a million people doing something similar, but just like featuring a different artist every week and their process and their struggle and their, all of it. Like it is cliche, but human, that like artists,
Telling you,
it's hard. I mean,
it's
I
not
have a lot of,
cliche. I mean, it's
yeah,
not
or it is,
cliche.
but that's okay too. Like, there is just no one pathway for people pursuing the arts seriously. And that's the double-edged sword. I have friends who are lawyers and doctors, and I'm not saying it's easier or better or harder or worse for them. It's just like, you do this, you do this, you do this, and then
Yeah.
that happens. But artists don't have that. And that's, no one is asking to be pitied for it. It's just the reality. So I think you have moments of real clarity when you see something you've been planning and envisioning in your head, and then it comes to life.
And that's a double-edged sword, because you don't want to base your value on that either.
Right.
Correct. Base your value on putting a product together. And I think that's why I'm like, that's not cliche. I mean, let's talk after this, because if you want to put together a show or a series asking artists like how about self-worth, I mean,
yeah.
and how do you establish a healthy artist life? That's why I'm saying it's not cliche, because I think in modern American times, I am like really I've been tuned out on like media for a while, but I don't think it's changed. Like the idea of an artist when I was growing up is, like a junkie, kind of, a drug addict, an alcoholic, like you use that to be creative. And then, like the whole bohemian life, like, that's bullshit. That is total bullshit,
Yeah.
And I think that myth, we were fed that myth.
Yeah.
Why? Because that myth was fed by advertising agencies that were making that like attractive. Ooh, let's read about these like weird bohemian types. So, and I think that set a whole generation of kids on the deep end to, failure. And like, I would love to talk about how can we be healthy artists, and, what's that mindset like?
Absolutely.
So, all right.
Yeah, that's a whole other conversation.
All right.
I'd love to have it.
All right, cool. Rachel Fleischer, filmmaker, mom
of two.
That's huge.
I know, my daughter just started preschool today. Oh my gosh.
That's right. I mean, that's huge. You got to be a healthy person to be a mom, have a career, have a husband, a family, a partner or whatever, and make it work, and so you're making it work, Rachel Fleischer.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks for the conversation. It's always provocative and makes me think about cool things. So thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for being my interlocutor today.
Anytime.
All right, cool. And we're going to talk. I want to talk to you about that, mindset day.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Bye.
Peace. Later.